Good afternoon. We have a few people on the line already, just getting our slideshow organized. Always a little, it's always something that's a little challenging getting these webinars going, but we've got about 10 minutes, so we will just be kind of sitting here in radio silence until everyone joins. We've got over 50 people coming on board for this webinar, so just bear with us while we wait for everyone to join. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, we've gradually getting people joining the meeting. It's about 2:55, so we will wait till 3 o'clock to start up, but just saying hello and looking forward to going through these data elements. It's as I'm looking at my various news alerts, I'm just always amazed at how many celebrities get involved in the alcohol industry, and we're just starting to ship for Kendall Jenner's tequila. We already shipped the Rock's tequila. I mean, tequila is amazing right now. And I wish we could bring everything out of Mexico, because then we don't have to deal with what we're dealing with out of Europe. So interesting times, and certainly continuing to be boom times for beverage alcohol. So we will continue to wait for more people to join. We've got about 50 people registered, so I imagine people will start to flow in over the next few minutes, and we will kick off in right about 4 minutes. Good afternoon again, everyone. People are flowing into the meeting. We are at about 2:58, and we're going to wait a few more minutes to start. We've got about 50 people signed up for this particular webinar, and we look forward to sharing what we know about the latest rollout under CBMA. And as said, just going to wait for a few more minutes to keep the meeting open. People will, I'm sure, be joining between 3 and probably a little after, but we'll try to start promptly at 3 and get this going. And we are going to try to be speedy today and get through this in about 30 minutes. We will keep the meeting open really as long as there's questions coming in, but I know how busy everybody is, and this is really fairly straightforward information, so we are going to try to get through it pretty quickly. And again, we'll start in just a couple more minutes. Gretchen's keeping me posted in terms of who's joining and how many, so we will be starting shortly. I'm very glad it stopped pouring where I am too, because it's actually relatively quiet right now, and it was very loud a little earlier with some of the rain and wind. So I think when working from home, we're all dealing with various elements, and sometimes it's the doorbell and sometimes it's weather, but we're all surviving this crazy time. And I just read the news in my state. I'm actually located up in Portland, Maine, and our state is now rolling out vaccines as of, I think, the 7th for everyone 16 and over. So I think it's a pretty exciting time as we go hopefully out of this major lockdown phase, and everyone hopefully can move on with their lives in a more free manner as we get through this. And again, welcome to everyone just joining. We've got a couple more minutes before we start, but thank you all so much for hopping on. And as you can see today, we did this in a Zoom meeting format. So we feel free, if you want to put on your videos and scan around and say hello to people. We will have some interaction at the end of the presentation. So if anyone does want to put their hand up or just start speaking and ask any questions. We will also have the chat running the whole time, and in this format, the chat is the place for Q&A. Jillian Carpenter, who is on the line with us, will be monitoring all of the questions as they come in, and she will be interrupting me or jumping in and answering as we go along. So again, we are at about 3:01 right now. So I think we will get this going. And again, welcome. I know people are joining. We've got a little over 30 people on the line right now. There'll probably be a few more people joining in as we go along. But again, thanks to everyone for joining us this afternoon. Our latest update on CBMA 2021, and it will be a run through of the new data elements required by customs for every CBMA entry filed as of April 6th. So some quick introductions. My name is Allison Levitt, and I'm the Managing Director of WSSA. Wine and Spirits Shippers Association is one of the oldest shipping associations in the country, founded in 1976. And the world has changed a lot since then, but we all still rely on cargo ships to get our goods across borders, across oceans, and there has not been a way to transport wine, spirits, or beer virtually yet. So we are very reliant on the cargo ships that move goods around the world. I have to say, in my over 30 years in the shipping industry, I have never seen a situation as challenging as the current global environment. You hear it in the news. Everyone got to know shipping a little bit over the last week with all the pictures, memes, tweets on the Ever Given, the vessel that was stuck in the Suez Canal. Can't even imagine how that happened. People learning words like bulbous bow and lots of jokes out there in terms of ships themselves. But anyway, that really was not what we needed in this particular time. It's going to cause further problems in equipment shortages. I was on a call earlier today talking to one of our carriers, and just the trickle down from the Asia to Europe traffic that goes through the Suez Canal. There is such a scarcity of containers in Europe right now, and those delays in the Suez is only going to make that situation worse. We are not here today to talk about the shipping crisis. At the end of this, if people want to ask any questions, I'm happy to answer. But from WSSA's perspective, freight negotiation is a big part of what we do, doing the contracts with virtually every steamship line. This year, we are not really talking about competitive rates as much as we're talking about rates that will get us on vessels and guaranteed allocation. It is a unique time. Demand is outstripping supply, and we are in a cycle that will probably be going on till the end of the year. So again, what we do at WSSA, one of the things that we started with and we continue to do, freight negotiation. Our second pillar, risk management. We run a best-in-class risk management program, providing insurance for all modes of transportation, as well as stock throughput and inventory in warehouses. We insure close to $1 billion worth of product annually, and we have a policy that's tailored 100% to the beverage alcohol industry, including machinery and corks and empty bottles and whatnot. But and our team handles any claims and really assists people in any risk management factors. I think with all the delays that are going on, and again, the shipping meltdown, if you aren't insuring with us, you might want to talk to us, or at least look at your policies, look at your duration of risk. There are containers that are getting rolled multiple times right now, sitting in terminals around the world. You want to make sure that that cargo is covered, and many, many standard policies have a very short window for duration of risk. So just throwing it out there, something to think about during this particular period. Our third pillar, education, advocacy, intel. This is the arena we are focused on today. I know most of you have probably attended some of our webinars or events or been getting our weekly mailings. And this is a major part of what we try to do at WSSA, keep everyone informed. We have been involved in CBMA since the passage of the law at the end of 2017. We've worked diligently both on direct lobbying in DC, getting members of Congress to understand what the Craft Beverage Modernization Act means to the industry. We've worked with many other associations on this to extend the law in 2019. And in 2020, we were actively involved in the shaping of the law to lead to permanence. Jillian and I spent, many, many hours practically every day of the week near the end of the year, talking to staffers at the House Ways and Means Committee, really talking to the people that are writing the language of the law and making the changes that help to get CBMA to permanence. So here we are. One of the other things we always talked about in the early years of CBMA and all of our meetings with Customs, generally at DC headquarters, we have been working with the CBMA team there. We always talked about automation and how this process can be made easier. And that was always a struggle because it was a short-term law. What we've ended up with right now, we're actually fairly surprised that we have these new data elements. Customs was always pushing back on doing any programming for CBMA. And lo and behold, we get the permanence and then we get new data elements. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Before we get started on this, I just want to shout out a big thank you to the team at WSSA who put this together. Gretchen Vievert, our program manager, who works with us on all of our events and webinars and mailings, and our special projects manager and CBMA expert, Jillian Carpenter. You see Jillian on the screen here. She is the one who actively handles CBMA claims. She handles CBMA spreadsheets. She works with many of you on the line and literally dozens and dozens of companies. And in the last few years, she has successfully filed literally millions of dollars of claims. And it's been just a great part of what we've been able to provide for our members. And I, again, can't thank Jillian enough for just getting in deep on the technical details of CBMA, living and breathing it for the last couple of years. So, as we go through our presentation, feel free to use the chat box. I mentioned this earlier. If you weren't on the line, you can please go ahead and type any questions in there. Jillian may be interrupting me with those questions or answering you right in the chat. We will try to get through all the questions. And at the end of the presentation, anyone who would like to jump in and speak out, put on your video, ask questions. We're going to stay on the line till questions are answered, but we are going to try to get through this in about 30 minutes. So, with no further ado, the latest update, 7 new data elements. They are listed here on the screen. They are effective April 6, 2021. Many customs brokers pushed Customs to give them a soft launch on this. It is an absolute hard stop. It will be effective April 6, and as of that day, any self-filer or broker, anyone filing a CBMA customs entry will need to put these 7 elements into their customs entry prior to transmission. So these elements will be required when claiming the rate at the time of entry. They will also be required on any post-summary corrections. So for any entry submitted or corrected, even if it was before April 6, these elements are now going to be present in the customs entry. So if a broker goes back in to fix an entry on a post-summary correction, they will have to add these elements. We have also been advised, and we've been going back and forth with Customs on the last 2 days on the protests. They also will request that these elements be included on any protest. So the protest can be filed after an entry liquidates, which is about 340 days after the entry date. So we will also be required to put those elements on any protest, and there'll be kind of a free writing field in the protest. Sounds kind of straightforward, but if we're doing a protest with 50 entries and all those entries are consolidation, that will consist of a lot of elements that will need to be added to a protest. So this is a big change, and what we want to do today is just get you, the importers, informed about what is going on. We don't have, we don't have brokers on the line. Most of the people on the line are, again, importers who are not going to be the ones filing these entries in most cases, but their brokers will be filing. But it is absolutely imperative that you are aware of these changes and understand kind of what's going on your CBMA entries. So we're going to go through each element pretty quickly. Again, they're fairly straightforward, and we really just want to get you on a high level knowledge of the elements. So number one, controlled group name. Again, this is pretty straightforward. It's a free typing field where the broker will type in the controlled group name that is found on the controlled group spreadsheet. As most of you are aware, when the law became permanent, one of the changes that went into place for January 1st was that brokers no longer needed to upload the documents, the supporting documents for CBMA, the controlled group assignment letter, and the CBMA worksheet that actually has the tax calculations. These documents, though, are still required, and the broker must have them in hand, and they will be absolutely used as the broker puts the data in for these elements. So again, pretty simple on this one. And in our example here, controlled group name, RBC growers, that is what would be typed in the field for controlled group. Second element, foreign producer ID. This is very new, and it is a formula. So it just kind of, again, I'm a broker a little, I'm not filing entries anymore, but I do geek out a little bit on brokerage issues. Brokers will now have 3 different ID numbers in any beverage alcohol entry. Every customs entry that is filed in the United States has a manufacturer ID, an MID, that represents the foreign producer or supplier. That will still be required. Every beverage alcohol entry is subject to FDA, though there also will be an FDA registration number, which in a way is also a foreign producer identifier. However, for CBMA, there is a new foreign producer identifier that will identify the type of product by the first character of the formula. So as you can see it here, the first character, B, W, or S for the type of product. The next characters are the first 6 letters of the foreign producer name. Then you add the first 5 characters of the foreign producer's postal code, and then finally the 2-digit calendar year of the claim. So we're going to just do a quick example of that based on the sample. We're going to run through the sample through the whole presentation. We've got, controlled group name, RBC Growers, one of their subsidiaries, Chateau de l'Amour. Product is wine. We've got the W. We've got the first 6 characters of the foreign producer's name. We've got the postal code and the year. So again, it's not rocket science, but it's just a task that needs to be done. We have heard that some brokers are requesting that importers put this code right on their commercial invoices. As many of you know, that FDA registration number is often on your commercial invoice. We highly suggest and agree with that request that these codes be put right on commercial invoices. It's not a necessity, it's not a requirement, but it certainly will help the broker if these codes are already on the commercial invoice. One of the things we've talked about to customs over the last couple of days is, what if there isn't a postal code, or it's not available, or what if it's a 4-digit code, or so basically what customs has said is that if there is no postal code, you just leave it out. If it's a 3-digit postal code, you put in the 3 digits. Don't put in zeros. Don't try to fill out the whole, the required 5. Just leave it as it is, or leave it out. So you might have a very short foreign producer ID if you have no postal code, or a random 3-digit code. I think the other thing you can notice just by this sample, how many suppliers start with either Chateau or Bodega or Hacienda. There's a lot of room for duplication here. When I checked our database, we had over 1,100 suppliers starting with the word Chateau. We had 1,300 suppliers with Hacienda. I think we had 900 with Bodega, et cetera, et cetera. So that's going to be interesting to see how many duplicates. These type of kind of free formulas are always ripe for errors. There is not going to be a database with these items, at least not right now. Customs has confirmed to us that they are not planning to have this checked against a database. So again, and Customs will say this over and over, this is not a perfect solution, but it is at least better than what they had before. So anyway, that's the foreign producer ID. Again, not so complicated, but certainly can be problematic somewhere down the line. The next item, the foreign producer name. Again, this is pretty straightforward. It basically will be the entity that is your assigning entity. It is usually going to be, well, it is going to be on your controlled group spreadsheet somewhere, but it's generally going to be that producer that is giving you the allocation. Again, straightforward, free typing field. I will say again, most brokers and most software that brokers use for transmitting entries do have great reference files. So brokers will have all this information in their reference files. They will code their foreign producer names and be able to kind of use drop downs. So again, especially for repetitive entries and stuff, it's not like they're going to have to type every single part of the name. They'll be able to use their reference files. But again, very straightforward on this one. Foreign producer name, that's is what it is. The allocation quantity. This one is not as straightforward as we would have hoped. It would have been nice for brokers just to be put the total quantity, but that is not how this is going to work, at least as we understand it now. The allocation will be based on the tranche that particular entry is part of. So in this example, if you are a wine importer and you've got a producer that assigned 130,000 gallons, 30,000 at the first tier, the dollar credit, 100,000 at the next tier, the 90 cents credit. If these are early in the year and you're still in that 30,000 gallon tranche, the broker will put in 30,000. They won't put in 100,000, 130,000. When they get to the next tier, they'll put in the next allocation amount. So a little bit, not crazy complicated, but just something that needs to be kept track of. And it also tells you that, yeah, you don't have to upload those documents that we've all been working with over the last few years, but the broker or yourself or WSSA in many cases will be keeping track of those allocations and depletions, because that will be an important part for the broker to know which tranche they're in, what allocation level to put into this field. So again, that's number 4. Number 5, flavor content credit indicator. And many of you, especially in the wine world or the beer world, might be like, what the hell is this? Why are they putting this in here? It isn't really relevant or pertinent to CBMA, but Customs did add this field. It is basically a straight yes or no, or a checkbox that you would check off, the broker would check if there was a flavor content credit. Flavor content credits are fairly unique to the spirits industry. If there's a mixture of spirit with some flavoring or some wine content, and those flavor content credits are supplied, approved and supplied by TTB, there again, if you have them. And the reason they did this, there was a lot of confusion initially with CBMA when a lower tax rate would be paid and Customs did not see supporting CBMA documents, and they just sent bills to the importers thinking that the importer was mistakenly claiming CBMA, but it was really a flavor content credit. Again, I have some issues with this one because I don't really think it solves the total flavor content credit issue, because if you're not filing a CBMA entry and only filing a flavor content credit indicator, that checkbox doesn't exist. So again, I feel there's still some problems there, but this is how it is. This is what we're running with. And again, very simple on that one, checkbox, yes or no. Now, the next one, number 6, the CBMA rate designation code. This is new, and we actually kind of love this new chart that CBP put out. It is a very clear chart of all of the different CBMA levels. It provides a rate designation for every single level, and it also supplies the tax rate, which we'll talk about in number 7. And it's, again, very, very clear. But what the broker is going to have to do is make sure they pick the correct rate designation code when they're doing the entry. This will go into element number 6. And most, as what we've seen in terms of the software that we viewed, these codes will be programmed into the system, so the broker will just have to pick the correct code. Now, this is just a small snapshot of the table. We're going to show you the whole table a little later on. There's quite a few different codes. So again, looks fairly straightforward here, but when a broker is looking at an entry and they're going to have, 25 codes that they've got to pick from, they've got to be careful. It is not going to be that easy. So again, just be aware that some of these things that appear quite simple, there's a lot of data that that is going to be input by the broker, and they're going to have to pay very close attention. And again, it's definitely adds some complication. So in this case, we're looking at still wine, 16% and under in the 30,000 gallon first tranche, that code W01010. The broker would grab that from the drop down and put it into click on it, and it would populate that field. And that leads us right into number 7, last but not least, the TTB tax rate. This is also found right on this form. And what we like about it too is that it has been converted to the per liter rate. I think that's always been one of those things with CBMA. The legislation is all in proof gallons and wine gallons and barrels, whereas customs has the way duties and taxes are paid, and the custom system is always on liters, proof liters or liters. So that's one of the reasons we like this chart. At least it really shows clearly the kind of customs part of CBMA and how those rates are converted. So again, using the same example, you see the tax rate that would be applicable. Now, one thing that we have seen with the tax rate, we really hope that this would automatically populate. If you put in, the rate code, the tax rate should pop up. So far, that is not what we have seen. Now, granted, we have not gone live on this, and some of you might have talked to your brokers about this. We viewed some of these fields. Certainly, the software should be internally editing these files, and potentially would give a warning if there was a mismatch from the rate code and the tax rate. Hard to tell how that's going to work until it really goes live. But what we've seen is that this is still a free field, that brokers can adjust this rate. And that was one of the biggest problems with CBMA from the beginning, where brokers could basically take any of the CBMA rates and put them as the tax rate on an entry, transmitted it, and would go through. So there are many brokers who just, they'd pick the first level that came up, even if it wasn't a CBMA eligible entry, transmit it, and 6 months later, a year later, the importer is getting a bill, and unfortunately having to pay it because there was just a complete mistake. And again, brokers were not very happy with how this system was set up originally. Hopefully this will be a big improvement, but as we see it, this particular field does still have some room for potential errors. So, okay, this is just a quick summary of those 7 items based on our sample. And again, not incredibly complicated. As mentioned, these elements will not preclude or take the place of the CBP 155 worksheet. So the allocations, depletions, tax rates still must be accounted for on the spreadsheet. And this is still a tool that brokers will use to input the correct rate designation and tax rate. I know some of you as importers keep those spreadsheets going. Some of you rely on your brokers. Many of you work with Jillian and she prepares them and sends them to brokers. But just keep in mind that all these data fields are just going to be additional to the work that is already going on with CBMA. As mentioned, we just wanted to touch on the complete tax rate table. So this is actually 2 slides, and I'm sorry, it's very small on the screen, we'd be happy to send you. And I think Jillian might put up the link on the chat. So if anyone
Yeah,
wants,
I did. I already shared the link in the chat. So if you want to access it, the link is in the chat to access the full table.
great. So again, I think it's it's a fairly simple, but it is quite long. This first page goes from beer through wines, and the second page again continuing on wines, ending up with spirits. So it is a pretty long chart. And again, you see all these different rate codes and tax rates. These are the items that the brokers are going to have to be scanning through on every single entry. And so again, not simple, not incredibly complicated, but it's detail that needs to be paid attention to. Now, before again we kind of open it up to any questions and answers and any thoughts or comments, the one thing I did want to bring up that is not really related to these elements, we have been working with many importers on claims through the past few years. And we know that many people missed deadlines that were required by CBP when filing either PSCs or protests. So many people that have missed those deadlines, and it's a variety of reasons. It was, incredibly complicated law. The guidelines were not presented until 10 months after the law went into effect. And it took people a long time to gather the paperwork and get a handle on what was going on. So there are a huge amount of claims that have now been filed directly with the TTB for entries that may have missed the deadlines. And right now, those are still sitting at TTB. There has not been a decision made, but there is quite a bit of pressure growing to, have TTB make a decision. All we're saying on this slide is that if you have some claims that you missed a deadline on, the TTB Form 5620 allows for a 3-year window. And if you think you're would like to get in line, shall we say, and get claims in front of TTB, we can guide you through that and help you file those. Again, no guarantee that they'll be paid, but said our feeling is the more that they mount up, the more likely that the TTB1 will make a decision and potentially pay out. There's also the potential for a class action lawsuit or further action should these claims not be paid. So we just wanted to throw that out there because that even on the TTB claims, the clock is ticking. So if anyone has questions on that, they can talk to us offline or send an email and we'll address that. Again, what we've been trying to do for our members and customers over the past few years is really, assist on all levels of CBMA, whether it's assignment certifications and the wording on those, or how to access those, or how to get your supplier to give you one, or whether you're eligible, the controlled group spreadsheets, understanding controlled groups, understanding the ownership levels and whether your particular producer is part of a controlled group, maintaining those spreadsheets, the allocations, the depletions, the tax rates. And with this new phase, we are also happy to help provide these data elements to importers or directly to brokers. Brokers are extremely busy. I think most of you use brokers, and your brokers do a huge amount of work for you for generally a relatively small fee. And they've just suddenly gotten, another between 20 minutes, an hour, whatever it's going to take to do these data elements on a consolidation. It could be literally hours. So it's important that you know what they're up against and what you can do to help them, or if you need help providing the data. Again, we've been filing protests and we can help with those TTB claims as well. Jillian, I'm going to ask you if there's any questions in the chat that you want to address. We actually did that in 28 minutes, and we're happy to stay on the line, but can you let me know if there's any questions or if you want to jump in with anything?
Yes, there are questions. I'm trying to answer some just in the chat. I've got a question that says, should we send new data elements to our broker, or can we upload data by ourselves? So you will have to provide this information to your broker. And right now we don't really know the extent what the broker is requiring the importer to provide to them. we have seen that a lot of them have requested the foreign producer ID, the allocation, and the control group name, and form and member. So, you know, I would check with your broker to see how they're going to handle, but for the most part, you will probably need to be providing them to them.
At least again, maybe some of the data, and it just also depends on, you know, how proficient the broker is in filing CBMA, how knowledgeable, and again, brokers that have been doing a lot of CBMA filings, you know, this, yeah, it's going to be complicated, but they know exactly what all these fields mean. When, in terms of the question of can you get on, you know, and do it a direct upload, brokerage, most customs brokers, and really all customs brokers, are using software providers that are approved by customs. Those software providers follow what's called the CATER, which is the programming guidelines. They have programmed these fields into the software. At this point, brokers are testing and going through the fields and making sure they, you know what to do. And again, it's just, it's going to depend. I know, you know, we do, we work very closely with Albatrans, and they are, you know, very proficient in the CBMA filings and have been testing the fields. And, you know, in many cases, they will be handling this directly for the importer. In other cases, like I said, it could be outsourced or it's something you can provide.
And we have another question about the allocation quantity. Is it the quantity that has been imported year to date, or just the specific order that was imported? So the allocation quantity is the total annual allocation per tranche that you've been assigned by that specific supplier. So if they've assigned you for wine 30,000 gallons at the dollar credit tier, you would input 30,000 gallons. And I think they potentially could be doing some kind of tracking in their system. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, you would just put the total that you've been assigned by that supplier for that tranche.
And I think, as said, it would be nice to think that the system is now going to track the allocations and depletions, and if a broker put in a wrong rate for the tranche, it would correct it. We don't know how well these edits are going to work. And again, Customs has repeatedly said this is not the end-all solution. This is, an interim solution that will help us administer this law. Now, the other thing just that we don't know in terms of January 1st, 2023, when CBM authority moves to the Department of Treasury, will these 7 fields still be required? Will Treasury use this data that's in the 7 fields to help them approve claims in 2023 when we completely revert back to the system of paying the regular tax up front and claiming it back to Treasury? There's a lot that we don't know. We are going to be working with Treasury and reviewing the report that they're required to produce in about 3 months now. It's a 6 month from January 1st. They have to provide a report about the next step, the transition to Treasury. We don't have that report. We've been trying to arrange some meetings directly with Treasury to talk about that and to get input from the importing community. So we'll keep you posted as that goes along.
And okay, we have a few more questions. It says, if the supplier will not give gallonage assignment until the end of the year, does the broker pre-enter the CBMA information, or can the entry be done at the end of the year? So in order to claim the CBMA rate at time of entry, you need to have the assignment letter with the gallons assigned. So if the supplier is withholding that until the end of the year, then it seems as though you would not be able to claim CBMA until you get the letter. So then you'd have to do retroactive claims either via post-summary correction or protest. So hopefully you can get your supplier to give you that assignment letter now, so you can claim at time of entry and you don't have to do the post-summary corrections or protests.
And keep in mind, assignment letters can be corrected. So if they give you an estimate and that changes, they can provide a new assignment letter. We've also seen instances where, the importer or the supplier changes importer, or you as an importer, you get a supplier away from somebody else. And then again, the previous importer can have an adjusted letter, like if they got the 30,000 and they only imported 8,000, that letter to that importer can be adjusted to 8,000 and you could get, the 22,000. So there is room to maneuver in this, but as said, legally, the customs broker, if you're using a customs broker, they are required to have those letters in hand before they put that lovely little C in the CBMA block and pay CBMA tax rates.
Okay, we have a few more questions coming in, and this one is pertaining to filing via TTB, and it says that we have an entry that our broker said that we missed the deadline and could not protest. We received product January 2019. Can we file a protest with the new process or wait to see if TTB will allow for this? So with this, you can try to file via TTB. Again, as we mentioned in the webinar, we do not know if this is going to be successful, but it's worth a shot. You might have to pay a filing fee to your broker, or you could potentially file yourself. You still have to provide the 3 required CBMA documents and then a letter from CBP stating that you have paid the X tax dollars to them, and then you file the form with TTB. So if you're interested in taking that route, we're happy to help you and guide you through the process, or even do it for you. But again, we don't know if it'll be successable.
But again, our suggestion is if you don't get it filed, you have no chance. So, it depending on what your tax amount is that you potentially overpaid, and whether you're owed $3,000 or $30,000, if it's spirits, and you have to pay a $300 filing fee or whatever it might be, you just determine is it worth it to put a little money out to get the filing done and see what happens.
Okay.
But if you don't file, forget it. There's nothing's going to happen. So
right. So we have another. We work with many growers that do not ship 30,000 gallons to the U.S., but might ship to 5 separate importers in 1,500 gallon lots, all within the 30,000 level. So is the 30,000 gallon or the 1,500 gallon the right entry for the allocation? So in this instance, if they've assigned you 1,500 gallons at the dollar credit tier, you would enter the 1,500 in the allocation data element. You would not put the full tranche that they're allowed. You would enter exactly what you were assigned by that supplier for that tranche.
And in theory, these foreign producer IDs, should be, also in that case, those all should be exactly the same. And customs would be able to see, okay, this foreign producer ID, there's 5 different importers. They're only, they're at 1,500 gallons each. That's all legitimate. Then nobody's got an overage. So these elements should help customs with their auditing and making, and checking on things. In all reality, I don't think too many of you, or if any of you, have gotten a CBP audit on CBMA. There have been some TTB audits, and they've been relatively painless for people, but they're, when TTB audits, they basically are looking for the same elements in terms of the paperwork and the proof of allocation and the control group spreadsheets, et cetera. And as long as, everything lines up, nobody's had any problem with their TTB audits. I do not think CBP has had the time to dig into CBMA. They were threatening for a while. We're going to be, out there auditing. They just have not had the time. It doesn't mean they won't, but I do think these data elements will help them in terms of monitoring and having a more accurate view of accuracy of CBMA filings.
Okay, we have another question. Will we see the amount of CBMA rebate on the post-entry summary, or will the line item C show the total tax? So on the entry, I think I'm interpreting this correctly, and you can chime in, Heidi, if I'm incorrect. So when you're filing the entry, the CBMA, and you select the C indicator and go through the data elements, you should be able to input or have a drop down of the correct CBMA tax rate per line item. So you would see the discounted rate that you're paying, the CBMA rate. And I hope that answers your question. If not, just chime in or write something in the chat. And then we have another question. What if you use more than one customs broker for entries? How is the total gallonage imported between the two or more brokers at the time of entry? That's a good question. So if you use multiple brokers, I would highly recommend having one person keep the CBMA spreadsheet tracker per supplier, so you know exactly what tier you're on, how many gallons you've used per supplier. And then you would relay to each broker the correct tranche you're on for that supplier. I would not recommend having each broker manage the CBMA spreadsheet. But if you want to reach out separately, we can talk about that in more detail, the best practices to handle.
Yeah, it's certainly not impossible, and there's a lot of people that do use multiple brokers. So it's just again monitoring that spreadsheet, and in some ways many of those data elements will be the same, and it's again when customs looks at it, as long as everything is lining up and that you're not over the tier, it's not illegal, it's not a problem. It's just making sure that you're as accurate as you can be on the allocations and depletion.
And then another thing I would chime in to say, if you're using multiple customs broker with the same supplier, I would just make sure, I know, it seems pretty straightforward, the foreign producer ID, but you never know how one could interpret it differently. Just make sure they have the same foreign producer ID on file that they're using for that supplier. And then I think that about wraps up the questions. There was one question, I might have to get back to you on this. The programmers have a field called add PGA to HTS. What does this mean?
So on the PGAs or OGAs, they used to be called, on the other government agencies, that is technical in terms of whether it's TTB or FDA or USDA. So that's what that pertains to. But maybe we can get a little more, if you can get a little more specific, we can answer that more completely offline. So feel free to, we'll either email you to get more specifics on it or email us and we can answer that more completely.
And there was another question that asked, can you give some examples of flavor content indicator? The flavor content indicator is not my specialty. I really don't know much about it. All we know is it's going to be
basically what especially if you're a spirits importer and you have blended your spirits with particular flavors that have changed the alcohol content or kind of changed the type of product it is, you apply to TTB with the formula and you get potentially a flavor content credit. There's, a lot of the big spirits companies have these flavor content credits, again, through application from TTB. So TTB gives you, the importer, your whatever tax credit you're gonna fall into. And if you are eligible for that, you provide that data to your customs broker, who then can use that data to reduce the tax that you pay. So it's not really that complicated, but it is limited in scope in terms of primarily, spirits and people who are blending spirits with flavors or adding wine content to spirits. So and it is controlled by TTB. I hope that answers the question. Again, we could probably send you some specifics and the regs on flavor content credit if you're interested. But and happy to get into more detail as needed.
Okay, and I think we have one more question that just popped in. if you only claim 600 gallons on the CBP 156, but you go over, but no, you are nowhere near 30K, is that a problem, knowing there are other importers for the producer? It all depends on what you are assigned. So if the producer assigned you 600 gallons only and you go over, you can't do that, but you can have them issue you another update their assignment letter if they have remaining allocation left at that tier, or any other tier they can assign you more. So then you would just update your CBMA spreadsheet and then update the letter, and then have your broker, when filling out the data elements, input the new assignment allocation for that tier.
And we don't know, for example, something like that, if that would trigger, customs requiring the documents. Like, again, these are the things that until we go live with this, but that could be one of the things. Like if you started with 600 and you bumped it up to, 2000, and, customs sees this discrepancy in the system, they may ask to see the supporting documents. Again, we don't know, but exactly as Jillian said, you can update your letter and update that input in the data element, and just maintaining your paper trail and your supporting documents remains very important.
All right.
Are we good?
That wraps up the questions. So
okay.
If anyone has any more, you can shoot us an email and we're happy to answer them.
Well, again, we hope this was helpful. I know we ended up going 45 minutes, but I think we got through a lot of material, and hopefully this just helped bring everyone into as much awareness as we have right now. This will evolve as it goes live. If need be, and a lot of things change, we may end up doing, another update. But again, we really appreciate everyone's attendance and the support you give us as an association. We are here for you, and we love seeing everyone on these webinars and meetings. You're probably sick of hearing me talk, because many of you have heard this a lot. So anyway, great to see everybody. Stay safe, be well, and again, keep in touch. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.